Hello again. I'm running for president. This time we're talking about balancing the budget. Second, I'm for having a balanced budget in 5 years. We're so far out of fiscal balance it'll take that long. Included in my agenda is an amendment to the Constitution for a balanced budget. It's desperately needed. It's the one thing that our forefathers left out of the Constitution. Our budget must be balanced, however, in two parts: increased by taxes and reduced government spending on itself. Those others don't want a balanced budget. They're running to be elected, not managing the country so they can feed at the tax trough. It's time to be serious about our nation's fiscal management. If you wouldn't do it in your household, government has absolutely no damn business doing it in our country. And government must reduce its payments on itself. No government of the people lasted long enough paying itself more than the workers who provided it earned by their sweat. Now let's talk about those two parts. We must raise taxes on everybody to begin with. No matter how much you make, you need to support the operation of the United States, but not government that wants to be royalty. The tax code will have to be addressed too, and yes, the rich will pay more, but then so will the 47% that don't pay taxes now. They need a stake in this country's prosperity too. I'm for equalizing the tax code. It's not fair for those on the lower end of the economic wage scale to not pay taxes, but it's more wrong for the wealthy not to pay more of it. There is a minimum cost just to reside in this country, and a tax code should reflect that. After all, this country became the wealthiest nation in history, with 70% in greater taxes on incomes of over $1 million a year and even less. Besides, it's bad news when too much money falls in the hands of too few. That leads to political repercussions that benefit the giver and receiver, but not the country. So it wouldn't hurt to raise taxes on all the groups. You'll enjoy these tables of tax collection that I'm proposing later on in this part. My table shows more income to go with reduced government spending, especially on itself. And government is not an aristocracy in our Constitution, as it is in any socialist communist government that some politicians want to guide us into, and some citizens. The one failing in our Constitution, as I said, is the requirement for financial competence. In other words, a balanced budget, except in an emergency like a time of war. Now, there must be a corresponding decrease in government spending on itself, too. When the feds pay themselves more than those who have to sweat to provide those feds pay, we're in trouble. Just showing up for a position or a job is not the same as having to sell or starve, and those should never be paid more than those who do. Our government currently is so incompetent it spends $3 for every $2 in tax revenue, and it plans to spend about $4.3 trillion next year on an income of $2.5 trillion. Think about it. If your household had an income of $2,500 a month and it spends $4,400 a month, how long would it have to be before your belongings and assets, if you had any, are on the street? Surely you don't think this government is any different than our household. Oh, they do. They think they can put their overspending on your credit cards or your tax bills. Sure, they can enrich themselves. They don't pay for it. You do. Government doesn't get thrown out in the street. You do. And for those who think that all that needs to be done is print more money, listen up. As more money is printed, our currency value falls in relation to our debtors' currency. And our debt to them is collected in their currency, not ours. So you can never print enough money. Any campaign that promises to cut the deficit without a specific and precise plan is the highest stack of BS ever seen. Our current president is good at making empty promises because he knows that we're not educated enough to know better. Either we buckle up or we prepare to give up our hard-earned assets, pensions, IRAs, and savings for an IOU that may not be worth the paper it's printed on. Decreased government payments to itself is next. All federal salaries over $30,000 must be decreased by 10%, and increments over $100,000 by 25%. The same holds true for eliminating all benefits borne by taxpayers. Contributions to IRAs, pensions, and the like must increase and be rewarded by their own endeavors, not guaranteed by taxpayers. The same holds true for outsourced jobs and services. Taxpayers should never guarantee government benefits. That's for the communists. And that's really beyond the original collections. While that, plus elimination of many programs that only enrich the campaign contributors, reduces the cost of government significantly, about $400 billion, without really hurting employees. For example, a federal employee making $50,000 a year will see his wage cut by only $2,000 a year, or $38 a week. If he can't handle that, perhaps he shouldn't be a federal employee. If we're careful, we can easily cut $400 billion from government spending on itself. But I insist every branch of government share equally in the savings. Every branch. And that, folks, is where we are going to go and where we have to go to avoid being Greece, Spain, Italy, or several more European countries. But take careful note. Unlike them, nobody is going to bail us out. Remember my advice in my campaign opening about the best investments you can make. The real key is, are we up to it? Okay, let's talk about that proposed collection of taxes. The effective tax rate is that percentage of taxes based on income after deductions. And it's not, well, radically different. It rises from 11 to 16%, but that's what we need to do. Just be sure to compare that current IRS effective rates in the following table with the table that follows this one. Pay close attention to the last two columns. That's the tax collected on the left for wage brackets and the average tax rate. Okay? We'll go a little slow so that if you want to pause to see where you're in there, you can do that. When you get to the bottom, you'll notice that we are showing 82 million taxpayers. We're showing a total income of $10,295 billion. That raise a total of $1.716 trillion in taxes. The current rate, as you'll see in the next table, will collect about $865 billion. Corporate taxes, again, will raise about $2.4 trillion. And that leaves us with a budget that's reduced to $3.9 trillion after that $400 billion in cuts. Will leave us with a surplus of $185 billion. And that's what we will apply to the national debt. And notice, again, the new tax rate has an effective tax rate for all of 16.6%. But that's mostly in the upper tax brackets. And that's more than a reasonable increase to cover what we need to cover and nothing else. Okay, here's the last table we have data for, and that's for the summary of federal income tax data in 2009. And that was not a really great year, by the way. But you'll notice again that the income tax collected was $865 billion, and the average tax rate was 11.06 million. Okay? Now, again, let's note that in 2009, all taxpayers paid a total tax of only $865 billion. And under my plan, the collection is $1.776 trillion, or $1,716 billion. More than double. And yes, it is far more from the rich. But the rest of us pay our share too. And that has to happen.